From what I understand, the three witnesses saw the angel Moroni, the plates, some other Book of Mormon artifacts. And the 8 witnesses saw the plates physically, handled them, but without seeing the angel Moroni.
Like, if I were no longer a member, I think the witnesses would keep me up at night. I had no idea how cool it was and how fascinating and interesting the story is.
And how historically viable
exactly
the accounts are. All those in favor, welcome to another episode. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the witnesses to the gold plates that the Book of Mormon was translated from. Cade has some information for us on that. To start us off, we're going to watch a video between a Christian apologist and a member of our church talking about the gold plates that should hopefully tee it up for us.
So, this is a video of Frank Turek, who's this Christian apologist. He goes and speaks on university campuses, and he wrote a couple books about how to help younger teens and things like that engage in apologetics. And he has some good work, he has some good stuff. And one of our own guys, one of our own friends, Hayden Carroll, who's a Latter-day Saint, hopped up at the Q&A section and he started asking him about biblical inerrancy. And where we're going to pick up, so they talk about inerrancy for a few minutes, and I think Hayden did really well, but where we're going to pick up is Frank is it seems to me like he's trying to shift it a little bit because he doesn't like the inerrancy discussion. And he starts saying oh, are you going to try and find an opening for Mormonism? Are you trying to make it seem like you're the right one by
Does
by
he
going
know
this direction?
that Hayden's Mormon?
Yeah, he does. And I think he says it at the beginning. And then he starts asking him about the plates. So we're going to watch a little bit of that.
Okay.
Right. Does that make sense?
What are you trying to get at, Hayden?
If I could believe,
Are you trying to find an opening for Mormonism?
if I believed in the infallibility of the Bible, I would be a Protestant. So that's
Well,
what
why
I'm trying to
aren't you?
figure
Welcome
out.
home. Why
Sure.
wouldn't you be?
Sure.
What evidence do you have that the Book of Mormon is true, or Pearl of Great Price, or
So here's where it
Doctrines
starts.
and Covenants?
I would argue that there are more witnesses for the golden plates of the Book of Mormon than there were for the
We
resurrection.
can't go too much further in this. We've got a big line. Let me
Sure.
just say this.
Sure.
Are golden
that's the
golden
crux.
plates a miracle?
In the way that they were received by Joseph, yes.
How do you know how he received them?
I mean, you're arguing like an atheist. I could say the same thing about the resurrection. How do you know the resurrection is
Well,
true?
because we have multiple eyewitnesses. How many eyewitnesses?
Okay, hold on. So, do you see the kind of the shift here? And I just think it's funny. We're going to keep watching, but I just think it's funny how multiple witnesses for the resurrection does the trick. Multiple witnesses for the Book of Mormon doesn't. But we're going to keep
How many
going.
eyewitnesses do we have for the golden plates?
19.
19.
Yes.
Who all saw them come from heaven.
They saw the golden plates. They handled them.
Okay,
they saw angels.
Golden
Sure.
plates in my garage.
Sure. But
So-
how many extant?
I think we can kind of stop here. This gets the message across. But I can make golden plates in my garage. I don't think he realizes that he's proposing an alternative theory to explain the witnesses. So that would be kind of like me going to Frank and being like, well, I can find someone who looks like Jesus and send him out there. It's not a miracle. You're presupposing a naturalist theory to explain why the witnesses don't work. And I also think he's just severely misunderstanding the depth and the detail that all these witnesses go into. And so I recently read Investigating the Book of Mormon Witnesses by Richard Anderson. Highly recommended, by the way. It's I think it's probably the best thing that's been done on the witnesses so far. You'll hear Daniel Pearson talk about it a lot. This is the book that got him into
Apologetics.
Yeah, this has had a huge effect on his life. But Hayden is right. The Book of Mormon witnesses are like this. If I were no longer a member, I think the witnesses would keep me up at night, wondering how I could explain it away, because it just seems like it's so compelling to me. And I don't think any of the proposed natural explanations for them really work. So, in my opinion, the only the only ways you can consistently go about it is to say either the plates were real and they were given to them by an angel, or I don't know. Like, I don't know what it is, but like, I don't accept that. So how much do you know about the three witnesses?
So from what I understand, the three witnesses saw the angel Moroni, the plates, some other Book of Mormon artifacts. And the 8 witnesses saw the plates physically, handled them, but without seeing the angel Moroni.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I'm going to kind of focus on the 3 witnesses for this video, but the 8 witnesses are very interesting too. And I think it's also kind of interesting that you have kind of 2 theories that are usually put forward to kind of explain away the witnesses. One of them is like, oh, the plates were fake, like Joseph made them, kind of like Frank said. Or they'll say like, oh, it was like a illusion, like they got tricked. Or they were like, I've even heard some people say that it was like a psychedelic experience. That has a load of problems, but
it's like there were mushrooms available in the forest that Joseph took them to. I'm not kidding. Someone said that.
I've had Protestants tell me that before. But so here's why I think it's interesting is because the 8 witnesses, in their testimony, they have this very like physical experience with the plates. They have this like, yeah, I saw them with my eyes. Joseph brought them. They were just kind of sitting there. I saw the figures on them. And then the 3 witnesses have this very like spiritual divine experience. So like either of those 2 possible explanations don't account for both the 3 witnesses and the 8 witnesses. You have some people that are saying it's a physical thing, which kind of fits with the Joseph somehow knew how to create and had the money to create fake plates. And then you have the other explanation, which is that it was some illusion or psychedelic experience, which doesn't really fit with the 8 witnesses because it was like a very grounded and just like, oh yeah, I just saw him, like he just had him. And it bothers me a little bit that we as members don't talk about the witnesses more. Like when I was reading this book, I had no idea. I had no idea how cool it was and how fascinating and interesting the story is.
And how historically viable
exactly
the
like
accounts are.
It just is so rock solid when held up to scrutiny. And so Don Bradley was saying this earlier in another interview. He was saying that earlier on, like nowadays when we are doing missionary work, we go and we show people the Book of Mormon, we have them read it, and we ask them to pray and have a spiritual experience with the Book of Mormon, and that's awesome. Like I think that's the way it should be done, and that's perfect. But in the early days of the church, it was the witnesses. Like, it wasn't just the Book of Mormon. Like they would go around and be like, look, we have these testimonies from these witnesses about these gold plates. Why don't you check out the Book of Mormon? And in my Sunday school class, I was kind of talking about this with some of my students. I don't know how to say that. What do you say?
Some of your youth?
Some of my youth. And they had no idea. And then I was thinking back, and no one taught me about the witnesses either.
No, I think I knew about the witnesses, but I remember being on my mission, my trainer sleeping in, I'm homesick, and reading the witness accounts in the first pages of the Book of Mormon. And yeah, being kind of fascinated because I didn't really know about it.
Yeah. And I just wish we talked about it more as a church because we're so big on sharing testimonies. And I think these are some of the most powerful and rock solid testimonies ever put into writing. And we just don't talk about them enough. And I want to go into each of the 3. So the first one I want to talk about is Oliver Cowdery. So all of these 3 witnesses ended up leaving the church. And yet all 3 of them never denied their testimony. And Oliver had this scrap with the church leadership and ended up leaving the church, and he became a really successful practicing lawyer and a really good politician. And you have all these like interesting statements from his contemporaries that were practicing law with him and that were doing politics with him. And they're like, yeah, like he's so rational, he's so honest. I just can't get why he would believe in those darn plates. Like it just doesn't make sense. And everyone kind of just described him as like being a little bit somber. He's very small and skinny person. And they just said people had such good things to say about him. And so it doesn't square well with the fact that he would just lie to his grave about these plates that he supposedly saw in this angel. And Richard Anderson kind of thinks that the three witnesses kind of follow like three different archetypes of people. And Oliver is like this intellectual figure. Like he's like very well educated, was a scribe to the Book of Mormon. He was a brilliant guy. And he still believed in the vision that he saw. And he still believed in the experience seeing the plates. And he never denied it.
And even when there would have maybe been like, even if he did truly experience the plates and the angel, there still would have been some personal motivation for him to deny it.
Absolutely.
To get back at these people that he had fallen out of favor with.
Exactly. And he, it's funny you say that, because on his deathbed, he was like, oh, I've been good. I've been faithful in my testimony, and I can rest assured that like I'm going to be taken care of in the next life. And so, I mean, this is totally just me stipulating, but I think that their visions really forcefully convinced them that denial of their testimony would result in some very bad implications in the next life. It shows when he's like, yeah, okay, I made it to the end of my life. I'm on my deathbed, and I've never denied that testimony. I stick with it. Yeah. So that's Oliver. David Whitmer is another interesting one. He is the one out of the three that never came back to the church, never was rebaptized.
So the other two came back. They left the church and they came back.
Mm-hmm. David Whitmer is also arguably the most interviewed and most talked to witness. He left the church, the saints went west, he stayed east, and he's like a really, really successful businessman. And it was the same thing. Like everyone had such good things to say about him. Like this dude is like an upstanding citizen. He's honest. He's smart. He's a good man. And people were coming like every day. Like there was someone that said there was like sometimes 20 people a day that would like go to his house and like try and talk to him. And he was the same way. Never denied it once. He would give you all sorts of dirt that he had with the modern church or the Utah church, as they sometimes called it. But he never, ever, ever denied his testimony.
And that's something I've noticed from different people who have attacked the witnesses, is that no one makes an attack on their character or their honesty. Mm-hmm. Like anyone familiar with the history, they always try to like portray them as like gullible or like susceptible to like this trick, but they never can make a case of like, no, these guys were not honest, upstanding people. Like from what I can tell, there's no evidence of them being conspirators or liars or not genuine in their testimony.
And that's what bothers me is like I feel like a lot of the times you're kind of just allowed to be like, oh yeah, well like it was a conspiracy. They just agreed to it. But people don't realize that they're proposing an alternate theory.
With no evidence.
Yeah, and you need to come up with something. And even the theory like, oh, they were tricked or they're gullible, you need to come up with some evidence for that. Like you need to show me that these people aren't sharp and reasonable and rational men when almost everything we have is to the contrary. People who aren't members of the church think it's honestly quite silly that they believe in these plates are saying, yeah, I don't know why they believe that, because they're so rational and reasonable and honorable.
Yeah. So something that I feel like Whitmer's the one that gets attacked the most by former members or non-members, those who want to discredit the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And something people say, they'll be like, oh, well, David Whitmer fell for the Kinderhook plates, I think it is, or the Strang, one of those. Is there credibility to that?
So you're talking about Martin Harris, which is, I'm so stoked to go here next.
Okay.
So Martin Harris, he is probably my favorite witness. And his story is like, it needs to be told from the rooftops, and more members need to know about it. But he was never promoted to church leadership like the rest of them. Like he was kind of just like left in this lowly spot. And he was in this different space where he was really old at the time he was a witness, where the others were decades younger than him. So he was just like kind of older. Like he was just in a different time of his life. And he got really frustrated with the Utah church. He, on several occasions, kind of called it his own pride. And he left the church and didn't follow the saints west. He stayed in Kirtland. And he joined the Strangite church, who for those of you that aren't aware, the Strangites were this branch off from the church. James Strang says he found his own plates, and he had his own truth, and he was going to kind of correct what was going on with the Utah church, or like the Brighamite church. So Martin Harris, a lot of people don't know this, he actually went on a mission for the Strangite church to England. But they sent him home early because he would not stop testifying of the Book of Mormon. He would only testify the Book of Mormon, and he would just, every chance he got, he would talk about his experience with the angel and with the plates. And finally, they're like, this dude is not, like, he doesn't care about the Strangite religion. He only cares about the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And they sent him home early. They're like, we got to get this guy out of here.
And the Strangite plates have their own witnesses, right?
The Strangite, I'm actually not familiar with that entirely.
From what I understand, because I tried to look into this a little bit before we started, especially Martin Harris, and from what I understand is the Strangite plates have their own witnesses, and Martin Harris is not one of them. Like, he's not one of the written legal witnesses. So it's like, it's not really
interesting,
super comparable to like the dedication that he went to with his witness of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. And he stuck by that witness arguably more forcefully than the other two. Like, the other two bore testimony to their death of the Book of Mormon and of the plates. But Martin, at least for me, just has this different fervor. So he comes home from that mission that he got sent home from, and he actually like was just living in Kirtland, like religiously homeless. Like, he just didn't have anywhere to go. And there's this Scripture Central article that gives a bunch of citations for all these, so I'm not gonna be able to give you all the firsthand accounts, but we'll put that link in the description. Martin, after the Saints left, he was like kind of just like this old, bitter, and just sad man that stayed in Kirtland and like took care of the Kirtland Temple while it was abandoned. Like, he would just kind of go there and just like take care of it, like keep it clean, and people would kind of roll up every once in a while, and he would like give them a tour. And eventually there was this missionary coming back from England who stopped at Kirtland because he wanted to see the early church. And he went to the Kirtland Temple and he saw Martin Harris, and he's like, "No way, you're Martin Harris." This is how I picture it going. It's like, you're the legend. You're Martin Harris.
You're
like,
one of the witnesses.
Your name is in my Book of Mormon. And he was like, "Oh yeah, the Utah church hates me. They're so corrupt," or whatever. Just being a angry man. Like, I just picture this old grandpa just still bitter about the past, like still upset that he lost his state championship in high school. And the missionary records that he asked him about the Book of Mormon, and he said the effect that it had on Martin was electric. Those are the words he uses.
Is it actually the word he uses?
He says electric. And Martin is like, oh, like you, and this becomes like a Martin Harrisism. This format. He goes, "You see how the sun is shining through that window onto the ground right there? That's how clearly I saw the plates, and I saw the angel." And he kind of follows that format the rest of it. He's like, "You see, he'll choose something around. You see that? That's how clearly I saw it." And this missionary was like, "Well, why don't you come back to Utah?" Like, what? Like, why not? And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, I would actually like to go see my family," because his wife and kids like left him there because he was just so like bitter and angry. And he's like, I would like to go back, but like, I'm not going to pay for it, and the church has to pay for me to have a round trip ticket because I'm not going to stay there for very long. I don't want to stay there for very long.
So he's like, Brigham needs to give me a round trip ticket,
Yeah.
basically.
And they'd constructed the railroad at this point, and Martin Harris is in his 80s, like really, really old, would never have been able to go by handcart or any other method. And so they take this information to Brigham Young, and he says, "I would spend all of my money up to my last dollar to get Brother Harris here." And they get him over there, and they send someone out, and they take him, they ride the train, and he's getting interviewed the whole way. Will not stop yapping about the Book of Mormon. Every person he sees, he's like, "Oh, well, you know who I am? I'm the guy who's the witness of the Book of Mormon. Let me tell you, you see that tree over there?" Every single time, every single person he sees, he bears testimony of the Book of Mormon. In fact, there's another missionary on his way to England who went and saw Martin. And Martin's like, "Well, why don't I go with you, and you can teach the people, and I'll bear testimony of the Book of Mormon, and we'll baptize thousands." And he makes it to Utah, stays the night in Ogden where the railroad is, And the next day, there's this story of him coming up over the hill into the Salt Lake Valley, and he sees the temple being constructed. And he just goes, who would have thought that all this would come from the Book of Mormon? This guy is obsessed with the Book of Mormon. And he never took that train home. He did not redeem his ticket back. And he was rebaptized into the church. And he was again given the priesthood by Orson Pratt, who he ordained to the priesthood earlier.
No way.
And I just see this beautiful story of redemption, like the guy who lost the pages, the guy who's always seeking this physical evidence. Like he's like, oh, I got to take it to Charles Anthon. I got to go see like what these characters are. And he lets this like pride that he has get in the way of his membership in this church that he loves. And at the end of his life, he goes and reconciles with his family, reconciles with the church, rejoins it, and he dies in Utah after like 6 years of living there. He's buried with a Book of Mormon in one hand and a Doctrine and Covenants in the other hand. He always had the Book of Mormon. It's just the Doctrine and Covenants part that he was a little bit
hung up
on shaky ground with. But like, I would suspect if he died 10 years earlier, he wouldn't have had that Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah.
But it's just the best story ever. And I don't know why we don't talk about it more as members, because it's rock solid for me. Like, this is just so important.
Well, especially if you're like a naturalist, like you're not really, into the religious side of things and you value history and historical documents. It's like, this is all so well recorded and it's so sound historically. So Martin Harris is the one that everyone, if we post this, like everyone will be in the comments, all these usually former members, and they'll be like, yeah, but he just saw them with spiritual eyes. Where does that come from?
There was one interview with, I can't remember even which witness it was, and I'll tell you why. It's because there is like hundreds and hundreds of interviews with these witnesses, and they all say that they saw it as clear as X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Martin Harris even one time says, like, I think it was like an axe. He's like, you see that axe over there? Like, I would sooner like put my head on a stump and like let you cut off my own head than I would deny my testimony. That's how clearly, that axe is how clearly I saw the plates. And David Whitmer kind of makes the same sort of claims. He's like, yeah, like as clear as this, like it was 4 feet away from me. I saw it. And David Whitmer even talks about this table. He was like, yeah, like you see this table? It was about the size of this table that the angel set the plates on. Like the angel appeared with this table and he put the items on it. And the interviewer was like, oh, like the literal table, like right there. And he's like, yeah, no, this table, this is it. And I call it Occam's broom. Have you heard of Occam's razor?
No.
So Occam's razor is
He's kind of like an outdoorsy guy, like he likes to drive razors.
Pretty much. Occam's razor is this philosophical thought that your explanation of certain data should be the most simple it can be, but also maximize how much it can explain of the data. Sure. Occam's broom is this term coined by, I don't know if he coined it, but he talked about it in his book that I read, by Daniel Dennett, who's a famous atheist philosopher. And he talks about how if there are data that don't really fit on that razor, you sweep them away with Occam's broom. So if you're going to say that they only saw it with their spiritual eyes or that it was some kind of like heavenly vision that wasn't actually real, you're going to have to sweep 95% of all of their testimonies.
Yeah, hundreds of testimonies.
Hundreds of testimonies from the 3 witnesses and all of the 8 witnesses, because the 8 witnesses never said anything like that. Their testimonies are very, very like concrete.
Yeah.
And the informal witnesses, like Emma is like, yeah, I like held the plates in a cloth. I like felt the leaves. Like you have Lucy was handed the plates. Mary Whitmer was shown the plates in more like the 3 witnesses. Yeah, like it. Right? Yeah. And he came to her and he showed her the plates. And this is kind of the last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop yapping. But a lot of the talk around witnesses and if they're reliable is about their disposition. So like, oh, were they like conditioned to believe that they would have that experience or something like that? And there are a lot of these instances with the witnesses where they seem entirely contrary. like Mary Whitmer was like just so bummed because she's like, I'm not even involved in this work. I'm just cleaning up after these guys all day while they're translating. Like, and
Husband's wasting all our money on this scam.
and so she just seems like in a really bad spot and like really kind of just like doubting
Oh yeah.
she was still like very like, oh, this just sucks. Like, I'm not even a part of this. I don't even know. Like, she just seems like kind of doubting. And she has that experience. And then another thing I didn't know until I read this book is like Martin Harris, like when the three witnesses went out there, Martin Harris was like, they kept praying for the experience and like the angel wasn't showing up. And Martin was like, guys, it's my fault. I don't believe it all. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I still am doubting. Like, I'm going to leave. So Martin like leaves and he like walks away. And then after he leaves, the angel shows up to David Whitmer and Oliver Cowdery and they have the experience. And then they're like, dude, poor Martin. So they go over to Martin and Martin's like, dude, I don't know if I have enough faith. And as he's talking about that, the angel appears and he has his experience with the plates. So like, no wonder he's so passionate about it is because it probably shocked him. Like he was probably still...
Probably felt very undeserved.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I didn't even have the faith.
Yes. He was probably just still on some level very skeptical.
Yeah.
And none of them were that way the rest of their life. None of them had that skeptical experience the rest of their life. So when Frank says like, oh yeah, I could make the Book of Mormon plates in my garage. Okay. Like you have a mountain of credible eyewitness testimonies that you're going to have to go across to really sidestep these testimonies.
Because you know how a lot of ex-Mormon creators are always talking about cognitive dissonance?
Yeah.
What is that?
Cognitive dissonance is when you come to like accept something that you thought wasn't true, or like you have to kind of create distance between yourself and something that you thought was true. So like if you are a person in medieval Europe and someone comes up to you and they say like, oh yeah, no, the sun is actually the center of the universe, and that really messes with you, it's cognitive dissonance. You're like, oh no, there's no way. Like
you kind of deny it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because to me, that's what I see happening with the witnesses. Like, a lot of people accuse members of the church of having cognitive dissonance with certain things, which I think is valid of certain members. You know, they hear about some more controversial issues and they try to distance themselves from it. But I can't believe how many opponents to the church or critics of the church, when they hear about the testimony of the witnesses, they're just like, no, spiritualize. Like, it's spiritualized. It's not real. Like, there's no evidence. It's like, dude, like, there's so much evidence for this historically, and you're just denying it with like, oh, spiritualized. Like, a couple of people who hated the church said that Martin Harris said that he saw it was spiritualized, even though in his own words, he says it completely contrary to that, like multiple times. And I don't know, it just seems like such a weird, I don't understand why they feel so comfortable just denying all that evidence and then in the same breath accusing members of the church of participating in cognitive dissonance.
And so there's this term, I think it's Greek, called aporia, which is kind of like, it's when you like realize that you don't know anything and then you start like reconstructing. And I had a professor once tell me, he's like, aporia is necessary for learning. He's like, that's why people hate philosophy, is because they go into their philosophy 101 class, their professor's like, you don't even know if you exist. You hold all these terrible conflicting ideas, and it's the professor's job to like break those down and to kind of tear it apart so you can actually construct something new and something important. So, and I see that happening with the witnesses too. Like, there are people who are like, okay, well, like, let's dig into this. And I see it happening with the witnesses themselves. They're like, okay, well, let's see these plates. And they have this cognitive dissonance in their lives. Like Martin Harris is like always kind of the skeptical one, the doubter.
Yeah, isn't he the one who traded out the seer stone for like a different rock to see if Joseph was lying? And Joseph's like looking at it and he's like, I'm sorry guys, like I'm not getting anything right now.
It's my favorite story. Martin was like, they're like down at the river skipping rocks or whatever, and he's like, this one looks like the seer stone. He slips it out, dude. Tries to trick him.
Like they're always trying to trick Joseph and catch him in his lie. Like they're not just like these humble sheep following their leader that people try to make them out.
I always picture Martin Harris, dude. Like Joseph's got his face in the hat and Martin's like... Just like so guilty.
So what would you say to someone who, what does he call it, aporia?
Aporia.
What would you say to someone who's watching this, whether they're a member of the church or any, a former member, anyone who has any interest in the witnesses of the Book of Mormon? What would you say to someone who's like, all right, maybe I am a little aporic on this. Like, I don't know what's going on. Where should I start?
I would start by just reading the testimonies in the beginning of the Book of Mormon.
Signed affidavits.
Read the signed testimonies of the witnesses. And then pick up this book by Richard Anderson, Investigating the Book of Mormon Witnesses. It is so cool, so awesome. And I would just encourage everyone to ask yourself, does my theory of what actually happened match with the data?
Yeah.
How well does my theory explain this stuff? And how simple is my theory? And we obviously believe that we have a very simple theory that explains everything. And that's that Joseph Smith was a prophet and those plates were delivered to him by God, and that these people were allowed to see them for this very purpose, so that we could talk and allow people to have that reason for belief. And I would just encourage you to approach this issue with a clean slate and just say, like, what is the theory I'm proposing? What does the data say? How well does my theory account for it?
Yeah.
And I think, obviously, we think that you're going to come to the conclusion that there's something going on.
Yeah, it's hard to explain by natural means.
Absolutely.
And I would say if you're kind of like me and you hear Cade be like, oh yeah, read this book, and you're like, I don't do that. I'm just kidding. I have started reading a little bit since we started this podcast. But if you kind of are like, I don't know if I'm that committed to this, the Mormoner.org article on this is fantastic. Really good. And what they do is they scan every source. So if it's like, oh yeah, David Whitmer said this in his journal, you click on it and they've scanned the page of his journal and you can read it in his own handwriting. And so it's fantastic at finding out what data is out there and how to engage with it.
Yeah. Ditto. Thank you for stopping by again. Another invitation to please don't crash out in our comments. Just respectfully offer a disagreement if you have one, or share something you liked, or if you have something that we could maybe talk about in the future, or people we could have on.
Any trauma in your personal life?
Any trauma, any personal anecdotes, anything like that you'd like to share with us, we're happy to hear it. Thanks for stopping by.